There's too much radiation for the contractive torque force at the center of the system. The system slows down too much, and the instability generates an explosion. It blows up. What it does, it releases a layer of material so it can regain stability. And so that's what we see. And then it regains stability, and when it does, guess what? The radius is much shorter. The ballerina has brought her arm in, so the thing spins way fast, like a pulsar. Okay? And then if it's fast enough, then we call it a black hole, and we say, look, the star made a black hole. And what I'm saying is, no, the black hole was always there. What we observe now is the dynamics of that black hole much closer to the event horizon, so we see the X-ray emission and all this stuff that we wouldn't observe before. By the way, all these things are X-ray emitters, from atoms all the way down to up to galaxies and so on. So do you see how the picture is a little different? Now we start to see the universe as cycles in space. Okay, instead of start, stop, start, stop. And you start to see that maybe, just maybe, that's how our universe was created. An enormous black hole that became unstable and blew out a certain amount of its ergosphere, a certain amount of its plasma, which generated all the rest of the stuff we see today. And that those cycles most likely go on and go on and go on forever. Even the dynamics of the Earth plasma, like the dynamics of the Earth stratosphere and the way hurricanes and weather systems move around the Earth, obeys those conditions. That is, the weather systems go from the North Pole down to the equator and then back up. And from the South Pole up to the equator and then back down. They don't cross over. And so on. So there is those dynamics, those plasma dynamics are seen at all levels. In the sun dynamics, we see the exact same pattern, that double torus pattern, in the dynamics of the plasma around the sun. So, and what we see in these dynamics, we see Coriolis force, and in the center of these vortices, what do we see? We see a black spot. We call it a sunspot. And typically we've been told that sunspots are surface events, and I debated this for 15 years, and finally they're finding out that they're not. They're vortices going towards the middle of the sun. Because what you're seeing in a sunspot is a vortex, Coriolis forces going towards singularity, and that's why they're most commonly matched by another one on the exact opposite side, right, that meets at the center. So those dynamics between the sphere dynamics and the geometry of space that we saw earlier, between the field dynamics, which would be the sphere around each tetrahedron, and the structure of the vacuum that generates it, that maintains it, we can see that these dynamics are actually present at all levels, even at the biological level, as I was saying earlier. And even you got here by going through these vectorial array dynamics in the womb of your mothers. I point that out all the time. It's like, you want a proof of the fractal nature of space? Well, have you not noticed? People take that for granted. People come out of other people. It's an amazing thing. They do. I mean, I have pictures of my mom with her grandmother, with her grandmother, and like the cousins and everything, and you can see the fractal link of all the mothers, you know, through space-time. I mean, it's freaky. People coming out of other people. I mean, it's pretty obvious it's a fractal structure. And so when you look at the way it happens, even a woman's womb, well, the first cell divides into two, and then the two into four. And when they do four, they arrange into a tetrahedral array. And then these four divides into four again, into two each, making 8, and those 8 arrange in a star tetrahedron array. In all of this, you're starting to see, in any case, that this very fundamental geometry is actually how you emerged into this world. You went through that structure in order to get here, and you went through it through the molecular interactions of water. And if we look at what really generates this placements of molecules or cells, well, there's a strand of code inside the nuclear cell that we call the DNA code. And this DNA code is really, an interesting thing, because if we look at the dynamics of that code, it has that spiral kind of torque field look to it. And assuming that these energy levels for cells are correct, and that we can actually describe the cells as like mini black holes interacting things, we would see that at the nuclei, we would see that at the center of the cell, we would see these spiral-like structures. But, there is a lot of code in your body for you to be here. The complexity is outrageous. Seriously outrageous. If you take the DNA that's in your body, in each cell, there's approximately 6 feet of DNA. And if you put all these strands of DNA end to end, you could wrap it around the world 5 million times around the world, 4 to 5 million times around the world. 4 to 5 million times around the world. That is inside your body right now for you to be able to function, so that all the cells know what everybody else is doing, and everybody's organized, and all the information is moving through, and all this is happening because there's a fundamental codonic interaction of the proteins that permits it. And guess what that code is based on? Well, the codon structure of DNA are based on a 4 to the third, relationship, which is 64 codon possibilities of combination. I find it interesting that this, 64 possibility codes that generates the amino acids of DNA and so on, matches what we call the affine connection metrical space that Einstein used to produce his field equation, the space-time manifold. It's called the affine connection, and it has a 64-element metric that generates a component for the space-time manifold structures. So then we have a direct link here between the space-time information, the space-time torque, and the way DNA is. Like DNA is like the transducer from space-time information moving through into the world and gathering information. You're like a probe for space-time looking back at itself from the outside and gathering information about its existence. Now, please don't go to your shrink and say, I think I'm a space-time probe, because you might get in trouble. But this is a very exciting kind of view that, like, we're starting to see the relationship between the space-time structure and the biology and how biology moves through things.